I saw him every morning on the same train. We never spoke. We just shared silence and city lights. But the day the subway broke down, everything changed. For the first time, he looked at me like he already knew me. I never imagined a subway seat could feel like destiny, but somehow that's what the 6:45 from Brooklyn started to become for me. Every morning felt the same until it didn't. I'd climb down the station steps with my hair still damp from a rushed shower, carrying a half-finished coffee and hoping I wouldn't have to stand the whole ride. The train always smelled like metal and old newspapers mixed with the warm, buttery scent. I liked that smell. It meant my day had begun. The first time I saw him, I almost didn't register the moment. He was just another commuter in a sea of tired faces, but something about his posture caught my eye. He looked focused yet nervous, as if the world was moving faster than he could keep up with. Gray blazer, dark curls, slightly messy eyes that seemed too soft for someone dressed for Wall Street. I only glanced for a heartbeat before looking away, because staring at strangers isn't the kind of thing I normally do, but that heartbeat stayed with me. The next morning, he was there again, standing near the same pole I always held onto. And the next morning, too. We became unofficial commute companions without ever speaking. He'd step in at the third stop, I'd already be there, pretending to scroll through messages, though I wasn't actually reading anything. Every time the train lurched forward, I'd catch him steadying himself lightly against the pole and our shoulders would almost touch. The almost became part of my routine. One morning, the train jerked harder than usual, and I lost my balance for a second. I felt a hand hover near my arm, not gripping, just ready, and when I looked up, he gave me a small, shy smile. A simple curve of his lips, but warm enough to make my chest flutter. I smiled back. It was the first real moment we shared, and I replayed it all day like a secret I wasn't sure how to feel about. By the second week, I started noticing small details about him. He liked mint gum, judging by the wrappers he kept folded neatly in his pocket. He read market news, but switched to music whenever the articles stressed him out. He checked his watch a lot, especially near the last 10 minutes of the ride. Maybe he was new, maybe he was nervous, maybe he was both. I wanted to know, but I never asked. One crisp October morning, as the sun spilled gold through the train windows, the 6:45 screeched to a sudden stop, and the lights flickered out. A murmur spread across the car. People groaned, complained, pulled out earbuds. The tunnel around us went silent, except for the hum of electricity somewhere far away. He looked at me through the dim light, and for the first time he spoke. "You okay?" Two simple words, but they felt like the start of something I couldn't name yet. "Do you think their meeting every morning is coincidence or fate?" When he asked if I was okay, his voice felt softer than the darkness around us, and for a second I forgot the train had stopped at all. I nodded, though my heartbeat was doing its own clumsy dance. The dim emergency lights flickered awake, spilling a pale glow over the packed car, and everyone started whispering about delays and deadlines, but all I could focus on was him standing close enough that I could feel the warmth of his sleeve, brushing mine whenever the train shifted. "I think we're stuck," he said quietly with a small exhale that sounded like he was trying to stay calm, more for my sake than his. I surprised myself by answering in a steady tone, though my nerves were buzzing. "Looks like it," I said, and he smiled gently as if reassured that I wasn't panicking. It was strange how quickly strangers could become anchors in moments like this. Minutes passed, slowly stretching like soft elastic. The tunnel outside felt endless, a dark line running beneath the waking city. People checked their phones, held their bags, sighed heavily. Somewhere behind us, a kid kept tapping his foot like a tiny drumbeat. I watched him for a second, then glanced back at the man next to me. His gaze was fixed on the floor as if he was lost in thought until he caught me looking. He lifted his brows slightly like he wanted to say something but hesitated. "I see you on this train a lot," he finally said, and my breath hitched because I had definitely noticed him too, but hearing him admit it made the moment real, in a way that felt almost intimate. "Yeah, I see you too," I said softly, and he let out a quick, relieved laugh, like he'd been worried he was imagining the connection. "I'm Ethan, by the way," he added, and the name suited him, simple, warm, steady. "I'm Maya," I replied, and when he repeated it under his breath, it sounded like he was tucking it somewhere safe. The strange stillness of the tunnel wrapped around us like an unexpected cocoon, and suddenly there was no crowd, no noise, just two people talking for the first time, after weeks of silent routine. He told me he was an intern at a finance firm, trying to prove himself in a world that moved faster than he could sometimes keep up with. I told him I was a graphic designer juggling deadlines and coffee cups. We laughed about the little things like how the subway always chose the worst possible moments to break down and how we both secretly wished for empty seats but never got them at the same time. Then the overhead speaker crackled and a muffled voice announced that passengers might need to walk along the tracks to the next station. A collective groan rose around us. Ethan looked at me again, this time with determination in his eyes. "If we have to walk, I'll stay with you, all right," he said, and something warm unfurled inside me. And before I could reply, the doors clicked open, spilling cold tunnel air into the car. Do you think Ethan already liked her before they ever spoke? Cold tunnel air rushed around my ankles the moment the doors slid open, sending a small shiver up my spine. People hesitated, unsure whether to step out or complain louder, but the conductor's voice kept repeating instructions, urging everyone to move calmly. I clutched my bag tighter and looked toward Ethan, who gave me a reassuring nod as if we'd known each other longer than 15 minutes of actual conversation. It felt easy to trust him in a way that didn't make sense, yet somehow made perfect sense. We stepped out together onto the narrow walkway that lined the tracks. The ground vibrated faintly from trains somewhere far off, and the air smelled like metal and dust. I could hear the distant hum of electricity and muffled footsteps echoing through the tunnel as other passengers began to follow. The lights along the tunnel flickered, creating alternating bands of brightness and shadow that stretched ahead like a path in some strange movie scene. "Careful here, the ground dips a little," Ethan said gently, placing his hand near the small of my back, not touching, just guiding. The gesture was so thoughtful, my chest tightened for a moment. "Thanks," I murmured, and we continued forward, our footsteps in sync like we had been doing this for years. Every few seconds, the silence between us broke with the soft sound of his breathing, or the distant chatter of commuters behind us. I could feel my nerves slowly shifting into something calmer, something almost peaceful despite the strange situation. This is definitely going to make an interesting morning story, I said, trying to lighten the tension. Ethan chuckled, a warm, low sound that made the tunnel feel less cold. Yeah, I'll probably tell people I rescued someone from an underground adventure, he said teasingly. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't stop the smile forming on my lips. Pretty sure I'm the one rescuing you, I replied. We walked for several minutes until the tunnel curved slightly, revealing a faint glow from the next station ahead. The sight brought a wave of relief across the group, but before we reached it, the train behind us groaned loudly, shifting on the tracks. Instinctively, Ethan reached for my hand. This time he actually touched me and his fingers curled gently around mine. Warm, solid, steady. I should have pulled away, but something in me didn't want to. Instead, my hand settled into his like it had been waiting there. You okay? He asked again, though his voice was softer this time, almost intimate. I nodded, because speaking might have revealed too much emotion, and I wasn't sure if I could hide anything in that moment. We walked the rest of the way hand in hand, not talking, simply moving together toward the waiting station lights. When we finally stepped into the open platform bright with morning fluorescence, I felt the shift instantly. People scattered toward exits, phones buzzing with missed calls and notifications, but Ethan didn't let go of my hand, not immediately. He hesitated like he wasn't ready for the moment to end. Coffee, he said, suddenly almost breathless. After all this, let me buy you one. And my heart answered before my voice did. Do you think Ethan held her hand because he cared or because he was scared? I didn't even need to think before saying yes. It slipped out of me like a breath I'd been holding for weeks. Coffee sounds perfect, I said, and the way Ethan's shoulders relaxed told me he had been hoping for that answer more than he wanted to admit. He finally let go of my hand, but the warmth lingered like a memory pressed into my skin. The station was buzzing with irritated commuters rushing for alternative trains, but our steps felt slow, unhurried, almost floating. Maybe it was the adrenaline wearing off, or maybe it was the strange calm that follows an unexpected moment that changes something you didn't realize needed changing. Ethan walked beside me quietly, his blazer slightly wrinkled from the tunnel trek, his curls rebelliously messier than earlier, yet he looked more real, more human, more interesting than he ever had when I simply watched him from across the train. We climbed the stairs to street level, and sunlight burst across my face, bright, warm, almost blinding after the dim tunnel. The city sounded louder too. Taxis, horns, conversations, the usual New York chorus, but for some reason it all felt softer. Or maybe I was just distracted by the way Ethan kept glancing at me like he was still making sure I was all right. There was a little coffee shop around the corner, one I had passed 100 times, but never stepped into because I was always rushing. Today I wasn't. Today felt like a pause in the middle of an ordinary life. He held the door for me and I walked in, breathing the smell of roasted bean sugar and something cinnamon-like that made the space feel small and comforting. What do you usually get? He asked while studying the menu, even though he wasn't actually reading it. Something sweet, I said. To make mornings hurt less. He laughed, a soft, genuine sound. Then sweet it is. We ordered and found a small table near the window where the sunlight cut through the glass in soft golden lines. He stirred his coffee slowly as if thinking carefully about something. I watched the movement of his hands, the slight tremor in his fingers, maybe from the cold tunnel, maybe from nerves. So, he said finally, I guess we officially broke our silent commute routine. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of his words. Maybe it needed breaking, I said, and he smiled in that shy, warm way again, the kind that reached his eyes. I've been meaning to talk to you, he admitted quietly, but I didn't want to be weird or intrusive. The confession made my heart start doing that fluttering thing I pretended I didn't feel. You weren't intrusive, I said gently. I noticed you too. His gaze lifted, then softened in a way that made me forget the busy cafe, the loud city, the world outside. I'm glad, he whispered, almost as if he wasn't sure he deserved to say it aloud. Before I could say anything back, our coffees arrived and the moment slipped into something gentler, calmer, yet still humming underneath with something new, something fragile and exciting. And as we sipped our drinks, I realized I wasn't thinking about trains or delays or work. I was thinking about Ethan. Maybe fate wasn't as dramatic as movies made it seem. Maybe sometimes it looked like two people sitting by a window drinking sweet coffee after walking through a dark tunnel together. Should she open up first or wait for him to make the next move? After we finished our coffees, the morning felt strangely new, as if the city had shifted a little to make room for whatever was happening between us. I wasn't usually the type to stretch out moments with strangers, but Ethan didn't feel like a stranger anymore, not after walking through a dark subway tunnel, hand in hand. When we stepped back outside, the sunlight felt brighter than before, bouncing off the windows, tall and warm. People hurried past us, but I noticed Ethan didn't fall into the rhythm of the city. He stayed close, walking at my pace, as if he didn't want the morning to end either. Do you have to rush to work? He asked, and the way he said it made me think he hoped my answer would be no. I checked my phone. My boss would probably survive if I showed up a little late. Not really, I said, and watched relief spread across his face. Good, he said softly. I mean, not good that you'll be late. Good that we don't have to hurry. I laughed at the clumsy sweetness in his voice. We crossed the street, and I could feel this growing pull between us, gentle but undeniable. We walked without a destination, just following the sidewalks winding through the morning crowd. The city felt different when we weren't rushing through it. We passed a florist arranging bright yellow daisies, a man selling small watercolor prints of Brooklyn rooftops, a dog tugging excitedly at its leash. Every little detail felt sharper, more alive. So tell me something about you, Ethan said. Anything, something not work-related. I thought for a moment. I collect postcards from places I've never visited, I said. Kind of like promises to myself. He smiled with his eyes again. That's beautiful. What about you, I asked, nudging him lightly with my shoulder. He hesitated for a few seconds before speaking. I'm scared of not being good enough, he said in a low voice. At my job, at life, at everything I try. I slowed my steps, surprised by the quiet honesty. It felt like he had handed me something delicate, something vulnerable. You seem like you try hard, I said. That already makes you better than you think. He looked at me as if the words meant more than I intended. No one's ever said that to me, he whispered. The morning breeze picked up, carrying the smell of fresh bagels, warm and toasty, from a cart nearby. We stopped walking without meaning to, just standing there in the middle of the sidewalk like the world had paused again. I'm glad we met like this, he said suddenly. My heart tripped a little. Even if it took a train breaking down to make it happen. So you believe in fate now, I teased. He shrugged with a shy grin. Maybe not fate, but something. Maybe timing. Maybe the universe nudging us a bit. I wanted to say I felt it too, that strange nudge like an invisible thread pulling us closer, but the words stayed in my chest unspoken. Instead, I said, maybe. We started walking again, slow, gentle steps side by side, both of us pretending we didn't notice how our hands kept brushing like they were remembering the tunnel. Should she tell him what she truly felt when he held her hand? We kept walking through the city without any plan, letting the morning light guide us between buildings that glowed like softened gold. I loved New York in the fall, when the air felt crisp but gentle, the kind that wakes you without biting your skin. Ethan walked beside me quietly, his hands tucked into his pockets, the edges of his blazer catching the sunlight, and for a moment I caught myself wondering what he looked like when he wasn't trying to hold himself together for work, for the world, for expectations he never asked for. He glanced at me once, twice, then again like he had questions he didn't know how to ask. You're quiet, he said finally. Thinking about something heavy, I shook my head slightly. Not heavy, just new. He waited, then tilted his head softly. New good? Or new confusing? I thought about that for a moment. Maybe both. We passed a little park where orange leaves fluttered down like they had nowhere urgent to be. A group of toddlers waddled across the grass chasing bubbles. Their laughter floated toward us, bright and airy, breaking the city noise for a moment. Ethan slowed down as if drawn to the sound. I love places like this, he murmured. They make everything feel less intense. I looked at him carefully. Do you feel intense today? He let out a small breath. I feel like something is happening, and I don't quite understand it yet, but I don't want it to stop. My heart stuttered in the quiet between us. I stared at the way the sunlight touched his profile, the curve of his jaw, the softness in his eyes, and I felt something warm expand under my ribs. We found an empty bench near the edge of the park and sat down close enough that our shoulders almost touched again. The almost was starting to feel like its own language. A small silence stretched between us this time. Soft, not awkward, like a blanket resting over both of us. I toyed with the zipper of my bag, saying nothing because I didn't want to rush whatever this was. Ethan leaned back, letting his shoulders relax finally. I don't usually talk this much, he said. I don't know why I'm telling you all this. I turned my head toward him. Maybe because you needed someone to hear it. He looked down at his hands, thoughtful, then lifted his gaze with a sudden bravery. And maybe because it was you. My breath caught. I didn't respond right away because I felt the words echoing somewhere deep in my chest. I watched a leaf drift down, landing gently near his shoe. The world felt slowed, softened, like time itself was kneeling beside us. I felt something in the tunnel, I said quietly, surprising myself. When you held my hand? His eyes widened just a little, but not with shock, more like recognition. I did too, he whispered. We didn't move. We didn't touch. But the space between us grew smaller in a way that felt almost inevitable, like the city itself was nudging us a little closer. Do you think this connection is love beginning or something else? For a while, we just sat there letting the city move around us like a river we were standing safely outside of. People walked dogs, jogged, sipped smoothies. Children tugged at sleeves, leaves scattered across the pavement like tiny drifting suns, but somehow all of it felt far away. The only real thing in that moment was the quiet breathing between us, the unspoken question hanging softly in the air like a fragile thread. Ethan looked down at the ground, then at me, then back at the ground, as if fighting the urge to say something too big too soon. I felt it too, that delicate weight resting on the edge of both our hearts. I kept my hands folded in my lap, but part of me stayed aware of how close his fingers were to mine, how easy it would be to close the space again. The almost touch felt louder than words. I don't want to mess this up, he said finally, his voice low, steady, but edged with nerves. Whatever this is, whatever's happening, I don't want to rush it and scare you away. I watched the way he inhaled slowly like he was bracing himself for a reaction. It softened something inside me. You're not rushing anything, I said gently. We're just letting it unfold. He nodded like he needed that reassurance more than he expected. A breeze drifted through the park carrying a faint scent of roasted nuts from a vendor cart at the corner. The sun slipped behind a passing cloud, dimming the light, just enough to feel like the world had pulled a curtain around us. Ethan glanced at our hands again, and this time I didn't look away. I felt the shift in him like a quiet yes whispered somewhere deep. I keep thinking about the way you looked at me in the tunnel, he said softly. Like you weren't scared, like you were just there with me. I swallowed because the memory felt close enough to touch. Maybe I wasn't scared because you were there, I said. The truth sat warm between us, growing roots in the silence. He turned his body slightly toward me, one knee angled in my direction, the kind of shift people make when they're letting someone into their inner world. Can I ask you something? He murmured. I nodded. If the train hadn't stopped, if none of that happened, do you think we would have ever talked? His question hit me gently but deeply. I thought about all those mornings, all those almost glances, all the silent maybes floating between us. Yes, I said without hesitation. Eventually, yes. He smiled in this slow, tender way that made my heart feel like it was leaning forward. I'm glad, he whispered. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then a tiny thing happened. Barely anything at all, yet everything. His fingers brushed mine lightly like a question shaped into touch. Not a grab, not a claim, just a soft, quiet invitation. And this time I didn't wait. I let my hand turn toward his and our fingers slipped together like they had been practicing for weeks. The world around us didn't change, but somehow everything did. Do you think the universe brought them together? Or was it all timing? For a long, quiet moment, we simply stayed like that, our fingers resting together, soft and certain, as if the space between us had finally chosen its own shape. The breeze shifted again, brushing loose strands of my hair across my cheeks, and Ethan lifted his free hand for a second, like he wanted to move them away, but stopped himself halfway, unsure if the gesture was too much. Somehow that hesitation made my heart soften even more. It meant he cared enough to be careful. We didn't talk right away, because sometimes silence holds more truth than words. The city around us hummed with late morning energy traffic, rolling in steady waves, dogs barking, leaves rustling with the kind of easy confidence nature always seems to have. It was a normal day everywhere, except in my chest, where everything felt newly alive. Eventually, Ethan exhaled as if reminding himself he was allowed to breathe. "This feels unreal," he said, barely above a whisper. Not in a dramatic way, just in a quiet, "how did this happen" way. I let his words settle before I answered. "Maybe things don't have to be dramatic to be real," I said. "Maybe real is quiet sometimes." He looked at me the way people look at something rare, like they're afraid it might disappear if they blink. "I like the quiet with you," he murmured. I felt warmth spread through me, not fast or sudden, just a gentle, steady glow. After a while, we stood up from the bench, our hands still linked without thinking. We started walking through the park again, following one of the paths lined with fading yellow leaves. Each step felt unhurried, like time had softened its edge around us. "Do you come here often?" he asked. "Sometimes when I need to breathe," I said. "The city is loud, but parks take the noise and turn it into something gentle." He nodded slowly. "I think I need more gentle in my life." The way he said it made me want to reach out and pull him closer, but I didn't. "Not yet." "You're gentler than you think," I said, and he let out a quiet laugh. A little surprised, like the idea had never crossed his mind. We paused near a small fountain where water trickled over smooth stones, making a soft, rhythmic sound. A couple walked past with matching cups of hot chocolate, their fingers intertwined, just like ours. Ethan followed my gaze, and for a second his cheeks flushed with a warmth he tried to hide. "Do you think we look like that?" he asked softly. I felt my heart give a small flutter. "Maybe a little," I said. His smile widened, slow and sincere. "I don't mind," he whispered. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me back to reality. Work, deadlines, messages, the world that still expected me to function. I ignored it for one more moment because I wasn't ready for the spell to break. Ethan noticed but didn't pressure me. "We should probably head out soon," he said gently, though his voice held a small trace of reluctance. "Yeah," I whispered, even though I didn't want to leave either. "But we don't have to end this yet." His eyes lifted to mine, warm, hopeful, steady. "Then let's not." And the city seemed to lean in and listen. Should their next moment together happen today or another day to build anticipation? We left the park slowly, as if our feet didn't want to obey the idea of going back to normal life. The morning had stretched itself into something softer than I was used to, something warm that felt like it had wrapped itself around us. Every few steps our hands would tighten together gently, like we were checking if the connection was still real. It was. It felt almost stronger now that we were leaving the quiet of the park and stepping back into the busy flow of the city. When we reached the sidewalk, Ethan looked at the passing taxis and buses and crowds as if he wasn't ready to blend into them again. "I don't want this to be over," he said softly. I felt a small ripple inside me because I didn't want it either. "It doesn't have to be," I said, "not if we don't want it to." He glanced at me with his hopeful, startled expression, like he wasn't sure if he deserved the yes behind my words. "Do you have time?" he asked. "Maybe we could walk a little more or get something else to drink or just exist in the same space a bit longer." His voice held that nervous sweetness again, the kind that made me want to reach up and hold his face between my palms, but I didn't. I just nodded. "I have time." So we kept walking without picking a direction, just letting the city guide our steps. We passed bookstores, tiny boutiques, a street vendor selling pretzels that smelled warm enough to make my stomach rumble a little. Ethan noticed immediately. "Hungry?" he asked. I laughed quietly. "Maybe." He steered us gently toward a small pretzel stand and bought one without letting me pay. When he handed it to me, his fingers brushed mine lightly, and the tiny touch sparked something small but bright inside my chest. We shared the pretzel as we walked, tearing off little pieces, taking turns not talking much because the silence felt comfortable. At one point, our shoulders bumped gently and neither of us pulled away. The world around us kept moving, but I felt like we were walking inside a softer, slower version of the city. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said after a moment. I nodded. "Is this strange?" he asked. "I mean us. Meeting like this? Talking like this? Feeling like this?" His voice dipped a little on the last part, and my heart gave a quiet echo in response. "Strange doesn't mean bad," I said. "Sometimes strange just means unexpected." He breathed out slowly. "It's unexpected in a good way, then." We stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. The sun reflected off his eyes, making them look warmer, darker, softer all at once. He shifted his weight slightly, turning toward me. "I'm really glad the train stopped today," he said. The words carried a tenderness I felt all the way down to my fingertips. "Me too," I whispered. The light turned green, but we didn't move right away. We stood there in the middle of a city that didn't slow down for anyone, yet somehow felt paused, just for us. And for the first time, I let myself wonder what this morning might become if neither of us walked away. Should the next step be a deeper conversation or a new shared experience? We finally crossed the street, but it felt like the city wasn't quite ready to let us blend back into its noise. Something in the air had shifted, or maybe it was just something in me. The morning kept stretching into something that didn't feel like morning anymore, something softer, brighter, fuller. Ethan walked beside me quietly, not because he didn't have things to say, but because the silence between us felt like a language of its own. After a few blocks, he slowed down and pointed toward a tiny cafe tucked between a flower shop and a bookstore. Its windows were fogged from the warmth inside, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted out every time someone opened the door. "Do you want to sit for a bit?" he asked. "Somewhere that's ours for a moment." His voice was careful, hopeful. I nodded because the idea of being in a small, quiet space with him felt right. Inside the cafe, everything was golden and gentle. Wooden tables, soft light, slow chatter. The kind of place where people didn't rush. We found a small corner table by the window. Ethan ordered for both of us because I couldn't decide between anything on the menu, and he said my eyes looked overwhelmed in a cute way. When he said cute, my stomach did this nervous flutter that I tried to hide by pretending to look out the window. When he came back with our mugs, he sat down slowly, like he was settling into something important. "So," he said with a small laugh, "this is happening, right?" I felt my cheeks warm. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I knew. Us, he said. This morning, this connection. I don't usually feel this easy around someone I barely know. I don't know if it's fast or weird or perfect or all three. He rubbed a hand over the back of his neck like he was afraid of saying too much. I just know that I don't want this to end when we walk out of here. My breath caught slowly, gently, like something inside me settling into place. I wanted to be careful with my words because they suddenly felt heavier than anything I had said today. I don't want it to end either, I said. I keep expecting the feeling to fade, but it doesn't. It just keeps getting clearer. Ethan looked at me with this quiet intensity that made the air feel different. Then maybe we don't let it fade, he said. Maybe we do something about it. I felt something inside me open. Like what? I whispered. He reached across the table, slowly giving me time to pull away, but I didn't. I placed my hand in his, and the moment our fingers interlocked, something inside me settled like, yes, this is what I've been reaching toward without knowing it. Like a real date, he said. Not just a train ride, not just a morning that surprised both of us. Something intentional. The word intentional felt warm against my skin. I'd like that, I said softly. For a while, neither of us spoke. We just held each other's hands across the table as the city moved outside our window. I could feel the beginning of something not dramatic, not chaotic, not rushed, but something gentle, steady, promising. When we finally stood to leave, he hesitated for a second, then leaned closer and pressed the lightest kiss to my cheek. It wasn't loud or bold. It was a promise wrapped in warmth. And in that moment, I knew the train hadn't broken down that morning by accident. Some stories choose their own beginning. This one chose us. Should there be a sequel where we follow their official first date?